All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, it's been one heck of an offseason up to this point. Some moves I'm sure a lot of you Cowboys fans love, some you maybe don't. But it looks like the move everyone's been waiting on seems to be right around the corner. There's a few interesting updates. We're going to get into that in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That's Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Dallas Cowboys have been making a ton of additions. They've been bringing back some players, obviously filling out the coaching staff. But the big move lingering around this organization is what is going to happen with Micah Parsons in terms of his extension. We've got a few conflicting reports here about what's going on. Let's go into the first. We got two. Let's go into the first one, and then we'll kind of compare and contrast and read between the lines. I think it's a good sign for Dallas. This first report is courtesy of NBC Sports. Clarence Hill of All City DLLS reports the Cowboys say you have to have real talks with Parsons' agent, whatever that means, though a deal could come together quickly if both sides are motivated. Parsons said Thursday he was unconcerned about not having a long-term agreement yet, adding he has spoken with Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones around the team facility. Parsons said late last season that he doesn't need $4 million annually, but since then, Myles Garrett and Ja'Marr Chase reset the market for non-quarterbacks at more than $40 million. Parsons is expected to top the $40.25 million yearly average of Chase. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. It's coming along well, Parsons said. I just played these last couple of years on 2 and 3 million. I think if I had 40 million, I'd be the happiest man alive. Me too. You go from playing for the league rookie minimum and get that big of a jump, I think anybody would be happy. So Clarence Hill, who's not a bad reporter, said, listen, they have yet to have real talks. Now, that's a very interesting way to phrase that, especially when you go into our second report here. Let's go ahead and pull this up. This is courtesy of Athlon Sports here. As of Thursday morning, CowboysCountry.com can report the Cowboys have recently met with Parsons' representation and that contract proposals have been discussed. That's kind of an interesting, it's almost the opposite of what Clarence Hill said. Terrence Parsons has suggested a blockbuster contract extension is on the way, or maybe even that it is done. It is clearly not finalized yet, as that news update would be everywhere, but make no mistake, a deal is almost surely on the horizon. And when Parsons signs his massive extension, he will become among the highest paid non-quarterbacks in NFL history. All right, here's what's going on here. This is just my quick, I'll give my 30-second take, and Miles, I'll throw it over to you to get your thoughts. Anytime you're in any sort of contract negotiation or any sort of deal, the hardest talks, the real talks, that's the last thing to happen. That's the last 10%. Anyone who's negotiated a deal, selling a house, interviewing for a job, right? The last thing that happens is sort of the in the weeds, the nitnoid, this closing date, the closing fees, an extra $1,000 on your salary, whatever it is. Those are the real talks, right? That's what I think we're seeing when Clarence Hill is saying real talks is they haven't gotten to the nitty gritty yet. I think they've agreed in principle. I think they all know the structure. I think they all know the rough outlines. At this point, it's about hammering out the final little details. I think the Cowboys are about to make this move. The reason you haven't seen reports of, like Clarence Hill says, there are no real talks yet, is I think because both sides are probably trying to debate over some finer points here deep in the weeds, and they don't want to make it public because that would distract from the negotiating process. That's all this is, right? Because you don't want to go out there like, oh, Parsons is fighting over, he's going to make 39 million a year, but he wants to make 40 million a year. It just becomes when multi-millionaires fight over $1 million, it just doesn't look good in the public eye. This is a lot of PR. This is a lot of, keeping things, close to the chest between the two negotiating parties. That's all this is. Anyone who's made any sort of deal understands that's what's going on here. But the larger thing, the larger point is the Cowboys are about to make the move everyone has been waiting for, and that's extending Micah Parsons. All right, Miles, over to you in just 1 second. But first, Cowboys fans, what are your thoughts on the Micah Parsons situations? And maybe what do you think of Parsons overall? Do you think he would be worth it as the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history? You think a little bit under that? Or maybe you think, there are some of you out there, I see it on social media, think it would be better off if you traded number 11. I personally disagree, but I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. But Miles, over to you. What are your thoughts on the situation?
Well, Nick, anyone who thinks that they should trade Parsons, I think that's a little bit crazy. If you look at his numbers, we talk PFF grades, we talk, everything in that 90 plus category is like Hall of Fame status. And every single year that Parsons has played in the NFL has been in that category. It's all blues, that 90 plus category color. He is solid blue down the board. So he's probably a pretty good player. He's probably adds a lot of value to this Cowboys team. And to that extent, I'd agree with you. I think we're seeing a classic agent team, trying to get the last little bit of the deal done, leaking out little bits of info to people to see, this guy's over here saying, hey, we don't have a deal. We're not even close. We're pretty far apart on talks. That's the agent being like, all right, let's get things done. Let's try to get this stuff pushed across the finish line. Then, you got more guys like Mike Parsons, his brother, coming out there saying, hey, the deal is almost there. Oh, excuse me, I misspoke. The team is the one saying the deal is so far apart, we're not close. That's them leaking that out there. Then Micah Parsons' camp leaking out from his brother saying, hey, the deal is really, really close. We're about to cross the finish line. Just there's a couple things that need to be done. And I think that's the key here. I think when you start to hear multiple sources, whatever the news is kind of irrelevant. When you start to hear multiple updates on something, it means it's very close and something is about to happen. Someone's trying to push this thing across the finish line. And I think very soon, Micah Parsons, he's going to be extended by the Cowboys, like you said. And it's going to be a great move because Parsons, he's a fantastic player. Love him or hate him as far as like whatever comments he says in the media. He's a great player. He gets it done on Sundays. And at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. I think he'd be great. I think even if he comes close to matching those top salaries, I think it would be worth it for him to be on this roster. He's such a valuable player. But I think that is the key here is when you hear multiple sources starting to talk about stuff, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. I think we're right at the end of this deal. And like you said, Nick, to your point, I think we're about to see this deal get finished. And I think the Cowboys are going to extend Micah Parsons very shortly.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. And I think it's a great point. Once you hear both camps talking, that's usually a sign that negotiations are getting hot and heavy, right? That's even if one camp even if they don't agree with what's going on, or at least publicly are saying that, when both sides of the negotiating table are leaking things out in public, it means things are ongoing and things are getting hot and heavy, which is exactly what you want, right? Obviously, that was one of the top priorities this offseason was to lock down Micah Parsons for the long term. I think the interesting approach here for the Cowboys will be the structure of this, because obviously they freed up a lot of cap space. They've made some moves. Of course, they re-signed Oso Odighizuwa, I think, which was a critical move, but they haven't made a big signing yet. They've got a lot of cap dollars. They have top 10 in cap space now after starting the offseason with much, much less, so much lower ranking in the National Football League. So the question now becomes, what do they do with that, right? Do they decide to say heavy front load Micah Parsons deal, eat up a good chunk of that Cowboy space and that cap space, and have it lighter on the back end, just that way they're more available in the future? I mean, I think that's an option. I think that's something they're probably strongly considering. Or are they looking to do just a normal extension and have a shorter or smaller, I should say, cap hit in 2025, 2026, and then have all this cap space and make a move with it, right? There's a lot of things that can happen. Obviously, Smith at left guard. You got Deron Bland, maybe Overshown at some point, hopefully if he's healthy. Those are guys in line to make a decent amount of money relatively soon. So there's a lot of dominoes to fall, but this is the first big one. And I think this is a great sign by Dallas that it's going to happen earlier, right? We've seen in prior off seasons, this thing has lasted, these negotiations have lasted all the way up essentially to week 1 of the regular season, like it did last year. And it's just a distraction. It takes away from your time and effort in terms of trying to make the team better with some of these free agent moves. Obviously, this year the Cowboys were much more active than they were in prior years, so just avoiding that distraction has been great. But just finally closing the book on this would be good for the Cowboys so they can turn their focus to the rest of the free agency, to the draft, and getting this team headed in the right direction. I think all signs indicate a big deal coming soon for Dallas and Micah Parsons, and it's exactly what the Cowboys fans have been waiting for, and it's a great sign for the future.